You're listening to GOAZCATS.com today, a podcast all about your Arizona Wildcats. Featuring the latest news and analysis from the staff at GOAZCATS.com. Now, straight from the old Pueblo, Tucson, Arizona, here's the host of GOAZCATS.com today.
Hi, I'm Troy Hutchison, joined alongside Matt Moreno, and here's another episode of GOAZCATS.com today. And, you know, Arizona, they went on the road, played a pretty tight game against Oregon, and then everything fell apart in the fourth quarter for Arizona. But initially, Arizona looked pretty good through three quarters.
It feels like the more we know, the less we know. It's just like you think you know one thing, you think you have a decision made about what this Arizona team is, and then they come out and compete with the number 3 team in the country. Now, that probably looks worse for the number 3 team in the country, that you let a team that's lost 15 straight games come in and compete with you, 14 at that time. But yeah, I mean, it's just like I didn't expect to see that from Arizona. I think we all assumed Arizona was going to get handed a pretty big defeat up in Oregon. There's always those moments where you say maybe this is the week where they figure it out somehow and by some miracle they win this game. But yeah, I mean, they went toe-to-toe with Oregon. I don't think there was any – it wasn't a fluke. It didn't feel like a fluke type of performance. It felt like, hey, they're going toe-to-toe with this team, which then makes you wonder, so what happened 2 weeks ago and 3 weeks ago? And, when they played San Diego State and NAU, what was going on in those games that, they can't compete like this? Because kind of every issue that we had pointed out about this team, they did the opposite of kind of what we've been pointing out, where the offensive line was going toe-to-toe with his defensive line from Oregon, which is their strength. The quarterback play was improved a little bit. It just felt like everything that was going, the running game especially, was going very well for Arizona. Everything that we had pointed out that said this is the reason they're going to lose this game, they did well. For no real reason. I mean, it's crazy to see kind of play out. You think about that game, that was it was less than a touchdown game going into the fourth quarter. I don't think that anyone predicted that. Maybe even these guys in the building, behind us, in the football offices. I don't know if they even believed that they would be able to have that game. Although Jedd Fisch, if you listen to what he said after the game, said he told the team, hey, in the fourth quarter, this is going to be a one-score game, and we'll have to figure out who wins this one. But it was just a crazy game to see play out.
Yeah, and, it started off with Oregon scoring 10 points, going on a 10-0 run. That interception by Jordan McCloud to start off the Arizona offensive drive. And when it's 10-0 like that, you're in Autzen State and you're like, uh-oh, here we go again. But they found their rhythm. They had a long, I think, 12, 15-play drive, scored the touchdown, and were able to run the football against that Ducks defense. I mean, that's something we haven't seen all year long from not only the offensive line, but the running game.
Yeah, well, and the thing to me is you're now starting to see somewhat of an identity start to form a little bit about this team, both good and bad. I think the bad part is this team has slow starts. I mean, I think we've seen that in every game where you go, they probably should have won that game or had a chance to win that game. You look back and you go, well, they were down 21-0, 10-0 in this game. They have those slow starts where teams are just jumping on them right away. It's not even taking 10 plays. It's 2 or 3 plays, and a team is jumping on them right away. And so that's been an issue. I think that feels like it can continue to be an issue, but at least Arizona is now able to identify that a little bit and say, hey, they need to be ready to go at the start of the game. Otherwise, it could get out of hand early. You eliminate those 10 points at the beginning of the Oregon game, and you just play an even game, through the first quarter. You have a different type of game that you're talking about. Maybe we're talking about Arizona winning this game right now. So they have to avoid those slow starts. Almost the disaster starts. I mean, it's not even been slow starts. It's just been out of hand in a flash. And so they have to avoid those. But I think there is some reasons to have some optimism about this team. If they can play like they did the rest of the season, again, like they did against Oregon, there's some things to, there's some reason to be optimistic about where this team is going. And I think there's a lot of pieces in place now. You're going into the bye week, have an opportunity to get better. But I think some of the pieces are in place to at least have a little bit more optimism than everyone felt after that NAU game.
Yeah, I mean, we went from complete, this is the rock bottom of Arizona to through 3 quarters of Oregon. Holy shit, they figured things out. I mean, that's the night and day difference between the two teams. And I think one big part of that, and I know he had 5 turnovers. I know it was 5 picks, and 3 of them were pretty awful interceptions. Jordan McCloud, there seemed to be a different confidence at the quarterback position. It seemed like he was able to stabilize things for Arizona.
It was really interesting to see because it wasn't just Jordan McCloud playing better. It felt like the entire team, and Jedd Fisch mentioned this, we're again recording this after his Monday press conference, the team's response to Jordan McCloud being in the game. Maybe he's just someone they all like.
Yeah.
Maybe they like his playing style more than the other guys. I don't know what it is. To me, you look at how the offense was running, and it looked better. Yes, there were 5 interceptions. You cannot overlook someone throwing that many interceptions in one game. Some of them are really, really bad interceptions that plays you can't make. But to me, that seems more easily correctable than the offense looking completely dead. And the offense didn't look completely dead. I mean, they were moving the ball. They were making plays. Yes, you want some more explosive plays, but to me, it felt like his issues were a little bit more easily correctable than some of the other issues that the other quarterbacks have had.
Yeah, and you talk about those picks. Let's go over those picks a little bit real quick. The first one to start the game, he had an open screen pass, but overshot the screen with the defender in his face, threw an interception there to start the game. And then the two I want to talk about are the two in the end zone. He's on the rollout. He probably could pick up the first down if he just runs the ball, throws it to Stanley Berryhill in the back of the end zone and gets picked off. And then he has a wide open Stacey Marshall in the end zone. And I don't know if he didn't see the safety, kind of lobs it into that area, gets picked off, led to a safety for Arizona. But I mean, those are mistakes that, like you said, seem pretty correctable.
Yeah, well, and you said you didn't know if he saw the safety. That safety, Verone McKinley, was like one of the nation's leaders in interceptions so far. I think he had 3 interceptions going into that game. That's the one guy you have to know where he is on the field. And that's what I tweeted at the time when it happened was you have to know where that guy is. If there's anybody on that field to know where he is when you're making a pass, it's Verone McKinley because he's capable of doing that. And so, like you said, it didn't lead to a disaster for Arizona, but those are just plays you have to make. And maybe that comes with, having some experience, understanding, the competition a little bit more. Obviously, Jordan McCloud didn't know he was going to start until, we believe, after Thursday's practice is when Jedd Fisch said he made that decision. So he's going through it saying, I think I have a shot. I'm probably going to be the starter, but I don't know. So I think if you give him some time to really study, the opponents, have a chance to really go into a week saying, I'm going to be the starting quarterback, maybe things change a little bit. But clearly, to me, it felt like he was very hard on himself. I think Jedd Fisch mentioned that as well, that, he's someone who's kind of beating himself up. You can't let that hinder you. That's the one thing I saw was he was very frustrated after those interceptions. I think you can allow yourself to be frustrated by those, but you can't dwell on those and let that impact you, the rest of the game, which it felt like it kind of did in that game. When you throw 5 interceptions, something's not right. It's not just 5 bad passes. It's something was wrong in that game. And so I think that's going to be something to watch out with him is he needs to be able to stay even keel and just be on the same plane the whole game, whether things go bad or good, because you can't let yourself get out of control like that and throw 5 interceptions, even have, multiple interceptions in a game. This team just can't afford to do that. It takes points off the board, takes potential scoring chances off the board, and Arizona's just not talented enough to have those types of games from their quarterback.
And especially when you're going on long drives that eat up 8-10 minutes of the clock like Arizona did in that third quarter. If they don't throw that pick, they stop on defense. You're talking about maybe Arizona, which they already did, having the ball for the whole entire third quarter. But when you have an offense that, just possession by possession, eating up time, you're killing yourself when you have turnovers because you're not going to get those chances back.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, I thought was that fourth quarter, obviously that's when things got out of hand. You said, okay, this game's over. To me, that's the talent disparity that we were talking about going into last week, where we've seen it even at the high school levels. A lot of people talk about that. Those teams from Phoenix just have more depth, have more talent a lot of times than the teams from Tucson. They come down here, and you say that Tucson team keeps fighting, and then that fourth quarter rolls around and you just go, the talent is deeper on those other teams where they just have more guys, and it's just more difficult to, teams wear down. And so I thought that's what happened to Arizona is, when Oregon can roll out, another 4-star guy who's fresh because their 4-star guy they played the whole game is getting a rest. It's just difficult to compete with that. And I thought that's what Arizona was up against in that game. Just made it too hard, I think, to finish out. And that's where that talent disparity shows. And that late in that game, in that fourth quarter, they said, all right, time to turn it on. Yeah. They ran away with it.
And, I thought Arizona, the way that they handled that was probably how they're going to have to handle it in the future in terms of time management. But in doing so, you have to run the football. And Arizona ran the football through that game. I know they only averaged, I think, 3.8 yards a carry, but they ran for over 200 yards. And the offensive line seemed to get a pretty good push against an Oregon front seven. That's one of the best in the country.
Getting Kayvon Thibodeau off the field was not bad. It's
Yeah,
not a
well,
bad thing
that
for
helps
Arizona.
too.
I think it definitely helped them, but they still have a lot of talent up front, especially in that front seven, that it could still be a problem. And based on what we had seen the first few weeks of the season, there was nothing that said Arizona's offensive line was going to get pushed against Oregon's defensive line, regardless of who was in there for the Ducks, because we saw Arizona getting blown off the ball against NAU, which is nowhere near the talent level of Oregon. And so nothing said this is going to be a successful game for the rushing attack. Somehow it was. And to me, that tells you, at the very least, the talent is still there. They have enough to at least do some things on the ground, which I think we have to give big kudos to Brendan Carroll, because there is a lot of negativity about him and what he's done with this group. Obviously, there's not a ton of talent there. We've talked about that. They lose a guy going into the week. Lose some depth, but he was able to, put something together and get that team going. Obviously, he's the run game coordinator here for Arizona, so he has a hand in that as well. But I think he deserves some credit for getting that group ready to go. A man down. They lost Edgar Barola earlier in the week, decided to enter the transfer portal. Didn't matter, and they were able to kind of get things going. Played 6 guys in that game, and they were off and running. And it was a good thing for Arizona to get that running game going. They played a couple more guys. Stevie Rocker was able to get involved in the passing game, which I think he does very well. Yeah. I think I'd like to see him even get more involved in the passing game and give him the ball, a time or two to carry. But Drake Anderson ran pretty well. Michael Wiley didn't fumble and had a solid game. So I think overall it was just a nice game for Arizona, sticking to the game plan of, which was very clear, don't let Oregon touch the ball. Yeah. Let's keep the ball in our hands if you're Arizona, and that's what they did. They ruled time of possession. They just dominated time of possession, and I think they had the ball for essentially the whole quarter more than Oregon. And so, I think they stuck to their game plan. And if you can do that, it gives you something to build on. So I think that's where there is some signs of optimism for this team.
Now, for Arizona fans that were watching the game, they see Arizona running the football downhill, because we're talking about game planning and how Arizona goes about game planning. I know I got a few text messages during the game. What's with the jet sweeps? Because you're running the ball downhill against Oregon, and then there's these jet sweeps. What are your thoughts about the jet sweeps in those games?
I think you have more thoughts than I do. I mean, coaches love them. I don't know why. It feels like it's not as successful. It's successful fewer times than it is, on the good side. I don't understand it. I mean, I think there's a place for it in the offense in some instances, but it feels like every coach is just too dedicated to it, and you don't see it have as much success as they think it does. I don't think it's catching anyone off guard. When you have athletes as talented as Oregon has, it's just very difficult to run those plays. I don't think it's coming out of the playbook. Sorry, Troy. I know you want to see it coming out. I think it's going to continue. It's a way to kickstart the running game. I understand that. And when you don't have that type of running game that they haven't showed the last few weeks, you need something else to get them going. They've tried Stanley Berryhill kind of carrying the ball a few times over the course of the season. That's something else they've done. But if the offensive line is struggling to, create holes, and the running backs are struggling to gain yards, you're going to see it. And so I think it's something that's here to stay. I don't know if you'll see it more, but I do think that it's going to stay in the playbook, and much to your chagrin.
No, definitely not one of my favorite plays Arizona runs when they're moving the ball. But, let's focus on the defensive side of the ball. We mentioned them a little bit. Got off on a slow start, allowing that 60-something yard touchdown pass. But after that, going into the fourth quarter, they pretty much held Oregon in check.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was a couple. I mean, at the end of the first half, you almost had, if J.B. Brown could have been a little bit quicker, you might have a touchdown going the other way. I mean, he had a clear path to the end zone if he could catch that pass. That was a great play by Trayvon Mason to come in and bat that pass. He got a lot of push up the middle, and he said he has that length. That's what he likes to do. You could see it developing a little bit. He bats the pass. It goes straight up in the air. J.B. Brown just couldn't get to the ball, but he had a clear path to go to the end zone. But there were a couple plays like that. Kenny Hebert had a couple nice plays. Jalen Harris had some really strong plays. So I think their defensive line and their front seven in particular had a strong showing. I like the progress they're making. I mean, that's a difficult offense to go up against. It looked like they had Oregon on their heels a couple times, where they were like, I don't know what we're going to run and what we're going to do here. They kind of went away from their running game too as well, which you have to credit Arizona's defense for, forcing that issue a little bit. I think Oregon probably would have had more success if they'd have just kept handing it to CJ Verdell and Travis Dye, but didn't do that, played into Arizona's hand, and Arizona has some more success, on defense. But I think it gives them something to build on. Maybe they got inspired by Don Brown taking one for the team, getting hit. I mean, that was a scary moment. Jedd Fisch said today that he's doing all right, but They want to make sure they protect Don Brown when his back is turned, because that looked like a brutal hit. And it looked like a scary moment there for a minute. But maybe that inspired the team to go out and do some good things. But overall, I think they showed that they can hang with a team like Oregon. And if you can do that, you can hang with any other team in the Pac-12.
Yeah, and like you said, they had their opportunities to make game-changing plays. I know Joe Tafoya, he texted me during the game saying that he hit his head on the roof when the ball was up in the air with J.B. Brown about to catch that ball. But overall, I think it was a pretty good defensive game for Arizona. Once things got out of hand, you had the mistake by Christian Young, leaving the receiver wide open, I think, on a 30-something yard touchdown pass, 20-something yards. There's still some finite mistakes, but it looks like it's heading in the right direction. And finally, you have not only a defense heading in the right direction, you have a whole team finally heading in the right direction.
If there is one thing, going back to kind of one of my original points about us starting to maybe learn more about some tendencies and some things that stand out about this team, the safeties are getting exposed right now. Yeah. And that's been an issue that has been, unfortunately for Arizona, kind of a theme over the last 10 years or so, that the safeties are just getting exposed. And it happened earlier to Gunnar Maldonado, got exposed. It felt like everyone in that secondary, in that safety group, got exposed at one time or another. Obviously, you're down Jackson Turner for that first half. He came in and made an immediate play. Mo Diallo was out for that first half, comes in and gets the sack for the safety. Could have used those guys. We won't talk about targeting, I don't think, this week, but we all know our opinions on those calls. But I think the safety group is something they're going to have to do some more work. They were much improved from the spring until training camp, and I thought from training camp until the start of the season they made some improvements. But clearly, Chuck Cecil, Dwayne Walker, that entire group in the secondary has some work to do, because that's starting to be something that we're starting to see a lot more and see consistently over these first 4 games. Safety's getting exposed in coverage quite a bit.
And especially when you head into the next week against a team like UCLA, who loves misdirection and play action passes that burn safeties over the top. That might be an interesting matchup looking ahead. Arizona, they allowed 17 unanswered points in that fourth quarter. Seemed like the game started to get out of hand for Arizona, but they didn't stop. They kept on passing the ball, which led to a couple more turnovers. You just count that as garbage time turnovers for McCloud, or are those the ones that you're not too worried about?
Not as concerned, but you still shouldn't be making those plays. I mean, you have to stay locked in, especially for him. At that point, he doesn't know that he's going to be, the starter for the rest of the season, as it sounds like it is right now. Jedd Fisch says, hey, as long as he's healthy, he's going to be the guy that's out there. I wrote about that before the game. I said, this is the point in the year. You have to make a decision. Whatever your decision is, you have to stick with it. Jedd Fisch went and did that. Whether it was going to be Gunnar Cruz, Will Plummer, whoever it was going to be, you needed to pick your guy and stick with him, because it's not helping the team having this rotation. And honestly, we haven't seen enough separation from any of those guys to say that guy deserves to be the guy for the rest of the season. So if you leave it up to, hey, we're going to go on a week-by-week basis, it's going to be a different guy every week. I mean, that's just how it's played out. It's what we've seen. So it was up to Jedd Fisch and this staff to say, we're making a decision. This is who it's going to be. Good or bad, that's going to be your guy, because you have to. I mean, you've just reached the point where you need some consistency at that position. Jordan McCloud gets that job, throws 5 interceptions, not exactly what Jedd Fisch is looking for. But I thought overall, like I mentioned earlier, the offense looked healthier overall and just, able to do more things with him at the quarterback position. So I do think, like we talked about earlier, that the mistakes he made, I think, are correctable. I think that's the most important thing. You don't want to be making those interceptions. My concern is going to be, in a close game, which this was, or in a moment when you need him to step up, is he going to be able to step up? We saw that in the game against NAU. He had the opportunity to tie it. Jedd Fisch says, he checks to a different play, doesn't tell someone, it leads to a conversion not happening. In that game, you have an opportunity late to take the lead, you're throwing interceptions. So I want to see what he does in real crunch time when there's a game truly, truly on the line, and what he does to step up. But I think there's no choice right now. You have to go Jordan McCloud. You have to stick with him, good or bad, because I think the offense looked better as a whole.
And how much do you think this bye week is a blessing for Arizona in terms of getting Jordan McCloud more familiar with the system?
Absolutely. I think this is the time for a lot of players and a lot of guys on this team to try and make a move, try and get into the rotation. I think it gives everyone on the staff a chance to kind of take a sigh and kind of breathe out and say, let's relax and figure out what exactly we have with this team. You now have a month's worth of games to go off of. You have a lot of film that you can watch and say, all right, this guy needs to play more, this guy needs to play less. We need to do this type of play more, this type of play less. Jet sweeps maybe, potentially some jet sweeps less. But I think it gives you an opportunity just to kind of recalibrate and get a sense for what you are as a team right now. You're over your biggest hurdle, which was Oregon.
Yeah.
You performed pretty well. I mean, you performed a lot better than either one of us thought, than a lot of people thought they would against Oregon. So you kind of now have an idea of what your baseline is and at least what you're capable of when you're playing okay. We haven't seen them play a good game. I don't think anybody can say that. But we kind of have the baseline of what they could be, both good and bad, I think. And so it's up to them to really figure out and hone in on, okay, these are the things that work well. Figure out how you can do more of those things and figure out who needs to be on the field and who doesn't. So I really think it gives everyone a chance to kind of hit the reset button a little bit, and then you get going for these last 8 games.
Yeah, and you get that chance to hit the reset button. You look at how you performed against Oregon and seeing how the rest of the conference is shaping out, because outside of Oregon, the rest of the conference is up and down. There's some winnable games still on that schedule, which after the NAU game, you wouldn't think of saying, but you look at Colorado, whose offense is struggling, ASU, who's up and down, UCLA, Jekyll and Hyde kind of stuff. Washington, their offense is having a hard time getting going. There's games out there to be had.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think there's opportunities. It's just about finding your rhythm, finding some kind of consistency with Jordan McCloud. I really do think that's going to help. And I asked Brendan Carroll about that last week. How much will just having that position settled, help the offense? And he said there's so many issues going on with other positions and other spots that it's not just that one thing. But, I mean, he was pretty clear that, if they could have that quarterback position settled, it would do a lot of good things for this offense. I think they've reached that point, so it's about what they do from here on out. But I think there's a reason to be a little bit more optimistic than after, the low point of, the program's history, if you want to call it that, against NAU. Which everyone was down on the team, rightly so. But I think there's going to be opportunities for them to snag a win or two, before the end of the season, which, again, coming off that NAU game, not a lot of people thought that.
So thank you for joining us. We'll be back with more for the GOAZCATS.com today podcast, and see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of GOAZCATS.com today. GOAZCATS.com is the totally unofficial U of A fan site and your source for University of Arizona team coverage and recruiting news.